In the early 1990s, a psychiatrist at the National Institute of Mental Health ran a strange experiment. He took healthy volunteers and did something that sounds almost impossible today. He gave them darkness, not bedtime with a lamp in the corner, not bedroom darkness with a glowing clock, a phone on the table, and streetlight leaking through the curtains. Real darkness, long darkness, roughly the kind of winter night a human body would have known before electricity existed, before bright gas lamps, before light switches, before the modern world started arguing with sunset. He expected that these people would simply sleep more. Instead, something older showed up. After a few weeks, the volunteers stopped sleeping in one smooth block. They began sleeping in two parts. First, a few hours of deep sleep. Then, they woke naturally, calmly, for a quiet stretch in the middle of the night. Then, without force, without panic, without a sleeping pill, they drifted into a second sleep until morning. They were not told to do this. They were not trained to do this. Their bodies did it on their own. And that should make you stop. Because tonight, millions of people will wake in the middle of the night, stare at the ceiling, and decide something is wrong with them. Their heart will speed up. Their thoughts will get loud. They will reach for the phone. They will search for phrases like, "Why can't I sleep? How dangerous is insomnia? How do I fall asleep fast?" They will treat the moment as a failure. But for most of human history, that moment was not a failure. It was part of the night. What ancient humans did at night was not simply sleep. They entered a completely different world. A physical world, a biological world, a social world. A world so dark, so quiet, and so psychologically powerful that modern people have almost forgotten it ever existed. Your bedroom is probably not dark. Not really. If there is a red clock glowing in the corner, your room is not dark. If your phone is face down beside the bed, your room is not dark. If the hallway puts a strip of light under the door, if the television standby light turns one wall faint blue, if the street outside makes the ceiling gray, your room is not dark in the way ancient night was dark, and that matters more than it sounds. Let us begin with the physics, because the physics is the first surprise. We measure light in units called lux. A bright office is hundreds of lux. Your phone screen can easily be hundreds of lux from just inches away. Daylight outdoors can be tens of thousands of lux, even more in full sun. Now compare that to natural night. A full moon, big and beautiful and bright to the human eye, is actually very dim in physical terms. Moonlight is not a lamp. It is sunlight reflected off rock, spread thin across the atmosphere, arriving as a whisper. Starlight is dimmer still. On a moonless, cloudy night, the world does not merely get darker, it nearly vanishes. That is the darkness humans lived inside for hundreds of thousands of years. Not once in a while, every night. And the body responds to that kind of darkness in ways most modern people rarely experience. Your pupils widen dramatically. Your eyes shift toward the rod cells, the cells built for low light. Color begins to fade. Sharp detail softens. Motion becomes easier to detect than fine texture. If you stay in true darkness long enough, roughly half an hour or a little more, your eyes become far better at using tiny amounts of light than they were when you first stepped into the dark. Ancient humans did not just look into darkness, they adapted to it. They let the eye become a night eye. And once that happens, the sky changes too. Today, most people live under light pollution. The night sky has been washed out. The stars are still there, of course, but many are hidden behind the orange haze of cities and suburbs and highways. But before electric light, the sky was not a background. It was an event. It was crowded. It was alive. The Milky Way was not a faint idea. It was a river overhead. Thousands of stars were visible. Constellations were not hobby material. They were memory devices, calendars, maps, and stories written above the tribe every single night. Now add sound. During the day, sunlight warms the ground and warm air rises. At night, the ground cools. Cool air settles low. That can bend sound waves back toward the earth instead of letting them scatter upward. If you want a simple picture, imagine a ball thrown toward a ceiling and then curved back down. That is not exactly what a sound wave is, but it helps. The point is that night can carry sound in a different way. In a world without engines, without air conditioners, without traffic hum, without the constant electric hiss of civilization, small sounds mattered. A footstep, a branch cracking, wind moving through grass, a child turning in sleep, a predator somewhere beyond the fire. Ancient night was not just darker, it was more informative. And inside that darkness, there was one extraordinary object: fire. A campfire is not actually very bright by modern standards. That is another surprise. It feels bright because your surroundings are so dark. Put a campfire next to a supermarket parking lot, and it looks small. Put it in a world with no electric light, and it becomes a sun. That small circle of warm light created a boundary. Inside the glow there was safety, warmth, faces, food, tools, children, elders, memory, language. Outside the glow there was uncertainty, and fire did something else that may be even more important. It reorganized the human mind. By day, people talked mostly about practical things: food, work, conflict, hunting, gathering, chores, social friction, the business of staying alive. But around fire at night, conversation changed. Anthropologists studying traditional societies found that daytime talk was often practical and immediate, while nighttime firelight talk shifted strongly toward stories, myths, distant places, strange events, the dead, the ancestors, moral lessons, group memory, big questions. In plain language, daylight was for solving problems. Firelight was for becoming human together. Think about how important that is. A species does not become civilized only by making better tools. It becomes civilized by making shared meaning. Around the fire, language could leave the present moment. People could talk about the invisible. They could talk about tomorrow, about last year, about what is right and wrong, about why the stars matter, about where the dead go, about what courage means, about betrayal, loyalty, love, fear, and the gods. If you want a simple way to say it, the fire circle was the first classroom, the first church, the first theater, and the first library. And then, after stories and silence and repair and prayer and sex and songs and tending the fire, people slept. But not the way modern sleep advice tells you sleep is supposed to happen. A historian named Roger E. Kirch spent years reading old court records, diaries, letters, literature, medical writing, and religious texts. Again and again, across different centuries and different languages, he kept seeing something peculiar. People referred casually to their first sleep and their second sleep. That casual language matters. People only speak casually about a pattern when the pattern is widely understood. If someone in an old text says they woke after first sleep, that phrase only makes sense if the reader already knows what first sleep means. And apparently many people did. The pattern seems to have been common enough that it had structure. People would go to bed sometime after dark, not instantly at sunset, and not absurdly late. The first sleep came first, heavy and deep. Then there was a waking interval. Then the second sleep came, lighter and often richer in dreams, carrying people toward dawn. Now here is the crucial part. The middle waking interval was not automatically treated as a problem. This may be the single most important idea in this entire story. If you wake at 2 in the morning in the modern world, the first thing you usually feel is threat. I should be asleep. I have ruined tomorrow. Why is my brain doing this? Am I becoming sick? What if I never fall back asleep? That fear changes the chemistry of the moment. Your body may have begun with simple wakefulness, but your mind turns it into alarm. Ancient people seem, at least in many times and places, to have had a different script. The waking interval was used. It had a role. People prayed. They talked quietly. They reflected on dreams. They checked the fire. Some visited neighbors. Some made love. Some simply lay still in a calm, thoughtful state. This was not necessarily insomnia. It was part of the architecture of night. The French had a beautiful word for this in-between state, a word blending sleep and waking into one idea. That alone tells you something. They had enough familiarity with the experience to name it, and biology may explain why it often felt peaceful. Let us keep this simple. Melatonin is often called the sleep hormone, but it is better understood as a darkness signal. Your brain makes more of it when light drops. It tells the body, now we are in the night phase. Now begin adjusting temperature, timing, repair, expectation. Modern people usually sabotage this without realizing it. We put bright, blue-rich light close to the eyes at exactly the hour when the body is trying to read darkness. The special light-sensing cells in the eye do not care whether that light comes from the sun or a phone. If they see enough of the wrong wavelengths at the wrong time, they send a message inward that says, hold on, it is not really night yet. So the issue is not just that screens are stimulating. The issue is that they are false noon. In a truly dark evening, melatonin rises more naturally and stays high longer. In long winter darkness, as in that sleep experiment, the body seems willing to settle into a different arrangement. And another hormone may help explain the feeling of calm during the waking interval: prolactin. Most people know prolactin only from discussions of breastfeeding, but hormones are rarely one-purpose chemicals. Prolactin is also associated with a state of quiet satisfaction. In long darkness research, it remained elevated during the middle interval of the night. The simplest way to understand that is this: the body was not generating pure stress in that period. It was generating a different internal climate, one closer to stillness than panic. Cortisol, the stress hormone, also helps tell the story. It is normally lowest deep in the night and then begins rising toward morning to prepare you for wakefulness. That means the middle of the night, in a natural rhythm, can be one of the biologically calmest periods of the day. So imagine the ancient human body in darkness. Melatonin high, cortisol low, the world quiet, no phone, no clock, no app informing you that you have failed at sleep. No wonder the waking interval may once have felt completely different. Now add one more layer, and this one is deeply practical: sleep in a group. We modern people usually imagine sleep as a private performance: one person, one room, one mattress, one schedule. Ancient humans often slept in groups, or at least near one another, and that changes the whole problem. Why? Because sleep is dangerous. Any animal that becomes still and less responsive for hours has a basic problem. Who is watching while everyone is gone? A study of Hadza hunter-gatherers found something extraordinary. Across many observed hours, there were only a tiny number of minutes when everyone in the group was asleep at the same time. Some people were asleep deeply, some were lightly asleep, some were awake. Older adults kept different hours from younger adults. The result was a relay. The group as a whole was rarely fully unconscious. That is a beautiful solution to a brutal problem. No formal schedule. No one saying, you take the first shift, I take the second. Just biology spread across ages. Young people tend to stay up later. Older people often get sleepy earlier and wake earlier. In the modern world, we call that a nuisance. In an ancestral camp, that may have been protection. The elder waking at 3 in the morning was not necessarily broken. The elder may have been the night watch. That idea should make many people reconsider what they call a defect. Sometimes a trait stops making sense only because its original world has vanished. Now let us walk through the night historically, because ancient people did not all experience darkness in exactly the same way. In ancient Egypt, night was not only dark, it was cosmic. The sun was imagined as traveling through the underworld, facing danger before it could rise again. Dreams mattered. The dark was alive with spiritual meaning. Raised beds also had a very practical purpose in some settings. Snakes, insects, and other nighttime hazards were real. In ancient Greece, sleep and death were imagined as close relatives, even brothers. That sounds poetic, but it is also a serious observation. Each night, you surrender consciousness. You disappear from ordinary reality. You trust that morning will return you. The Greeks also built healing temples where people slept in sacred environments, hoping dreams would reveal diagnosis or cure. Think about that. Sleep was not passive in their minds. Sleep was intelligent. Rome gives us another side of the story. Cities after dark could be dangerous in very human ways. Theft, fire, assault, confusion, narrow streets, law with weaker reach. Night changed behavior because it changed risk. Darkness was not romantic for everyone. It could also be terrifying. That is important. We should not make ancient night sentimental. It was beautiful, but it was also serious. In many indigenous traditions, night sky knowledge was astonishingly precise. The stars marked season, movement, food cycles, ceremony, and geography. The sky was not decoration, it was working information. In some cultures, the dark spaces between stars mattered as much as the stars themselves. That should humble us. We think we advanced because we lit the night, but in doing so, we may also have made ourselves blind to a giant library above our heads. And then there is fire again, because fire may be the central invention in this whole story. Some anthropologists have argued that fire is not just one helpful tool among many. Fire may be one of the reasons we became the kind of humans we are. Cooked food gives more usable energy. More usable energy helps support a larger brain. Fire also protects against predators, allowing people to sleep on the ground in closer social groups. It extends the useful day beyond sunset. It creates time that did not previously exist, time for teaching, memory, ritual, and courtship. That is not a small change. That is civilization in flickering light. And firelight differs from modern screen light in another important way. It is warm in color. It is rich in reds and oranges. Poor in the blue heavy light that strongly tells the body it is daytime. I do not want to oversell this, because ancient people were not running laboratory tests beside the hearth. But the broad point is clear. A fire and a phone do not tell the body the same story. One says, gather, soften, night has arrived. The other says, stay alert, more information is coming. Now we come to the turning point. How did this ancient pattern begin to disappear? Slowly, then all at once. Cities began installing public lighting, oil lamps, then better lamps, then gas lighting, then electric lighting. At first, this must have felt miraculous. Imagine walking through streets that no longer belonged entirely to darkness. Imagine reading late into the evening without destroying your eyes by candlelight. Imagine shops, theaters, factories, social life, all expanding past sunset. This was convenience, wealth, safety, power. But every technology is also an argument. Artificial light argued with the body. It told the nervous system that sunset no longer had authority. It stretched evening. It postponed night chemistry. It made it possible for industry to claim the hours that darkness once protected. Factories could run later, then all night. The night shift was born. Schedules hardened. Alarm clocks made morning less negotiable. Eventually, the ideal sleep pattern became one solid block squeezed neatly between work demands. And in a shockingly short period of time, people began to forget that any other pattern had existed. That may be the strangest part of all. It is one thing for a culture to change its habits. It is another for it to forget, almost completely, that the old habit was normal. Within a few generations, waking in the middle of the night changed from a familiar human experience into a sign that something was wrong. The old names faded, the old rituals faded, the old acceptance faded. Now the only approved sleep became seamless sleep. And once that happens, every interruption feels like evidence. But the body is older than the electric grid. That is the key idea. Your body is not designed by app developers, mattress companies, or productivity culture. It is designed by a very old conversation between light, temperature, hormones, danger, social life, and time. The master clock in the brain reads the retina. Every organ has its own timing machinery. The liver, the pancreas, the immune system, the blood vessels, all of them respond to the body's internal schedule. Mistime the light, and you mistime the body. This is why the science on night shift work is taken so seriously. Repeated circadian disruption is not a trivial inconvenience. It has been linked strongly enough to major health concern that international cancer authorities have classified night shift work as probably carcinogenic. That should get your attention. Biology cares very deeply when the night signal is broken, and even ordinary home light can matter. Bright light at night has been associated with mood problems. Dim light in the room can affect heart rate and metabolism during sleep. The body is not only asleep at night, it is regulating. That is what we often forget. Sleep is not a blank, it is active maintenance. And ancient humans experienced that maintenance inside a much clearer environmental signal. Darker nights, cooler air, more stable rhythms. Less contradiction between what the eyes saw and what the clock was supposed to believe. Even temperature mattered. In several pre-industrial groups, people tended to fall asleep not exactly at sunset, but during the period when the environment was cooling. That makes sense. Your body also cools slightly as it moves into sleep. Modern climate control has flattened some of those signals. We live in artificially stable rooms, and then wonder why the ancient machinery of timing sometimes looks confused. The machine is not confused. The machine is being lied to. And this brings us to the most intimate part of the story. What did ancient humans do at night, really? They did not all do one thing. They changed modes. Some slept, some watched, some fed the fire, some prayed. Some told stories, some studied the stars, some made children, some listened for predators, some interpreted dreams. Some lay quietly in the middle interval, not trying to optimize it, not trying to fix it, not calling it pathology, simply inhabiting it. The night made people philosophical because darkness strips away the illusion that you control everything. The edge of the fire reminds you how small the human circle is. The sky reminds you how large the universe is. Sleep reminds you that consciousness itself is borrowed. Morning is never guaranteed. No wonder so much religion, philosophy, and myth grew in the dark. The night is where the human being naturally meets uncertainty. That is why the dark has always done two opposite things at once. It makes fear bigger. It also makes truth harder to avoid. In darkness, distractions fall away. You hear your own thoughts more clearly. You notice the breath of the person beside you. You remember the dead. You think about the future. You feel the body. You realize you are not separate from the planet's rhythms, no matter how brightly you light the room. Modern life is almost perfectly designed to interrupt that realization. If you wake in the night today, you do not wake into stars, embers, and silence. You wake into the option of importing the entire economy directly into your nervous system through a screen. News, messages, comparison, panic, stimulation, blue light, false urgency. You wake in an ancient body and summon the day with your thumb. Then you wonder why sleep retreats. So here is the most useful way to think about this, especially if you are older or if your sleep has become lighter, earlier, more interrupted. Do not begin by assuming defect. Begin with context. Yes, real insomnia exists. Yes, sleep apnea exists. Pain exists. Reflux exists. Depression exists. Anxiety exists. Medication effects exist. If you are suffering, medical care matters. None of this is an argument against good medicine. It is an argument against shallow stories. If you wake once in the night, that is not automatically a disease. If your older body sleeps more lightly than it did at 30, that is not automatically failure. If darkness helps more than gadgets help, that is not superstition. It is biology. Tonight, something very old is going to try to happen in your body. Light will fall if you let it. Melatonin will rise if you stop blocking it. Temperature will drop if your room allows it. Sleep will come if you do not bully it too hard. And if you wake in the middle of the night, you will face a choice. One choice is the modern choice. Panic. Reach for the phone. Turn a quiet interval into a stress event. Tell your body it is daytime. Fight the night. The other choice is older. Stay still. Do not rush to label the moment. Let the body have a little darkness. Let the chemistry proceed. Let the old machinery speak before the modern world interrupts. Because your body may not be broken, it may be remembering. Remembering the first sleep, remembering the watch, remembering the second sleep, remembering the fire, remembering that darkness was once not an error but an environment, remembering that for hundreds of thousands of years, being awake in the dark was not automatically a crisis. Sometimes it was prayer, sometimes it was closeness, sometimes it was thought. Sometimes it was simply the most honest hour of the human day. Maybe the real loss of the modern world is not only that we sleep worse, maybe it is that we no longer know what the night is for, and maybe the first step back is very small. Less light, less panic, more respect. If you wake tonight, do not begin by asking, "What is wrong with me?" Begin with a different question. What if this too is human? And in that question, you may hear something the body has been trying to tell you for a very long time. The dark is not empty. The dark is instruction. And some part of you still knows how to listen.